Last week, 3 ranchers from 3 very different operations answered one simple question. If you had $50,000 to invest or deploy in your ranch today, where would you put it? And the answers ranged from infrastructure and diversification to building strong businesses designed to survive the next downturn. Today, it's part 2 as that conversation shifts. What's the worst way to spend that money? When does equipment actually make sense? Should producers be paying down debt right now or keeping cash available for opportunity? And how are ranchers beginning to use technology and AI to make faster and better business decisions?
Investing in overheads that you don't need for a business. And we've never taken the time to run the margins on it. When we do run the margins on it, we figure out that it's terrible. It's a money loser in our business.
But the conversation quickly turned into something much bigger than simply buying or not buying equipment, because for today's rancher, the real question may be this: how do you use capital in a way that actually moves your business forward? Today, Zach Hobson, Dallas Mount, and Paul Foster join me again as we continue part 2 of our conversation on deploying capital, managing risk, and building a stronger ranch business. That's on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Well, if you didn't listen to last week's show, you're going to be stepping into the middle of this conversation here today, but don't turn the dial because it's still going to be well worth your time to listen here today, and you can always go back and listen to last week's show. Hi, everyone. Justin Mills here on the Working Ranch Radio Show, and as you heard there in the opening, we're going to continue on here with the remaining part of that conversation with my 3 guests, Zach Hobson out of East Texas, Dallas Mount out of Wheatland, Wyoming, and Paul Foster out of Sheridan, Wyoming, as we get through last week. Of course, we started talking about how would you deploy the $50,000. Now we're going to talk about how maybe you wouldn't, and also some other conversation that comes into that just in regard to how can we also use that to expand our businesses. So I think you're going to find today's show very helpful, and always you can go back and listen to last week's show. If you have a favorite podcast provider, go there and listen to it. Make sure you also subscribe. If you do listen to the show via a podcast, click to subscribe, and then you'll always know when we kick out a new show. You can also catch all of our programs through our podcast site at workinranchradio.com, or you can find us on a new outlet, which is at agriamerica.com. Hey, also coming up later on the program, Chris Thompson with Merck Animal Health will be back with us. We're going to be talking about one of their nasal vaccines, so be sure to tune in later for that. And also, meteorologist Don Day will be in. We'll take a quick look at our long-range weather. Hey, for those of you that are regular listeners, if you remembered a couple of weeks ago, I offered a giveaway. You could win a set of Working Ranch Radio Show leather coasters, and you just needed to text me your answer. And this was the question: what is your favorite type of steak and how do you like it cooked? That was the question. Well, stay tuned. At the end of the program here today, I will reveal the results of that survey out there and also who is the winner of the Working Ranch Radio Show leather coasters. Hey, the next issue of Working Ranch Magazine will soon to be coming to your mailbox if you are a subscriber. And if you're not, you can get subscribed by going to workingranchmag.com and get started. Or you can also stop by your local Tractor Supply store and pick one up off the shelf. And a shout out here today to the Tractor Supply stores in Big Rapids, Michigan, in Billings, Montana, in Brunswick, Maine, and in Bushnell, Florida. Well, let's get into our show here today, and we're going to pick up, as I said earlier, in the middle of this conversation. Last week, we started off with a big question. That was, what would you do with the $50,000 to deploy in your business? And we're going to pick up here today with the second biggest question. Let's jump into that conversation right now. All right. What is the worst way to spend $50,000?
The worst way, I think, would be investing in some mechanical stuff that you don't need, that's not going to add value to your business.
Okay. All right. Dallas?
Yeah, stupid ways to spend money. Investing in overheads that you don't need for a business that sucks, right? And I see it very common of like, oh, I've got this thing that I think I need to do that we've always done, right? That we tell ourselves a story that we have to do this part of the business. And we've never taken the time to run the margins on it. When we do run the margins on it, we figure out that it's terrible. It's a money loser in our business, or the margins are just really narrow. And now it needs new stuff to do that thing. right? So I think the worst place to spend money is for stuff you don't need for a business that sucks, right? But a lot of people don't know what part of their business sucks, right? So they're going out and buying stuff that they think they need and they think it's working, but if you actually step back and look at it, it doesn't. So, but
okay, all right, Paul, what's your answer?
It's going to go kind of a different way. It's not something that's tangible per se. With these markets, it's kind of like the lottery. Nobody saw it coming the way that it did, and the fact that it's lasted as many years as it has. I would say a poor purchase would be spending that money on something that is not towards your goal of where you want to be in years to come.
Okay.
So that all
right,
that brand new truck, that the equipment, the overheads, to get your name in the paper because you bought the highest selling bull at a seed stock producer, things like that. I mean, don't try to avoid your taxes with it because that just doesn't go towards your goals either, more likely.
Yeah.
So,
okay, guys, let's take a break here. When we come back, I want to push back a little bit on not necessarily equipment in general, but some aspect of that. Okay.
A high-functioning rumen drives herd performance, gut health, and profitability. Levucel SC by Lala Man Animal Nutrition is the only natural occurring rumen-specific active dry yeast probiotic selected to optimize rumen function, boost fiber digestion, and help you get more out of your forage and feed. No matter how you supplement your herd, including Levucel SC can help your cows do more on what they already have. Discover the right formulation for your herd at chooselevucelsc.com.
Leverage the cattle fly and insect control solution that refuses to be average. ProZap Protectus Pour-On Insecticide IGR. Now, this isn't your average pour-on. It's a triple active solution you can count on. An insect growth regulator, adulticide, and synergist all working together to knock down profit-robbing insects that affect cattle health and your bottom line. Ready to use as a pour-on for season-long control of lice, which means less time in the chute and more time getting things done. For fewer treatments and less handling that pays in dividends, choose Protectus. Talk to your Neogen rep or order through your distributor today. Visit prozap.com for more information. All right, so we asked in the last segment, what is the worst way to spend $50,000 on? And there was definitely some agreement, I think, and then probably really with all three of you. I know Dallas didn't specifically say equipment, but I know, Zach, you said investing in mechanical stuff. Paul, you said maybe the new fancy equipment out there. But I do want to push back a little bit on that. And I'm not trying to maybe justify some of the expenses or expenditures I've made in some ways. But at the same time, if you're trying to run, some of these operations with, as you had mentioned, Paul, earlier, you had said, man, 7-8 years ago, we were on a shoestring budget and there wasn't a lot of money to put towards some of this kind of stuff. But when you look at, like, do you invest in a pickup or a side-by-side? Of course, those kinds of things that now that you got your little flush in the market and there is that desire to want to go out there and maybe purchase some type of equipment. Is any type of equipment justified? Where do you look at that? And I know, Paul, you kind of said, okay, what's going to hit your goals in this? But because you cannot have some sort of equipment to an extent, unless you're just going to be out on horseback, but then you're going to have to justify time and labor and some things like that. So let's not go down the road of just nixing all equipment. I don't know that that's necessarily what you guys probably mean in a way, but where do we justify and draw that line? And I know even if you're a cow-calf business and you're just a one-guy outfit, you're going to need some sort of equipment.
I agree with you 100%. I look at replacing, we'll just take a truck for an example, or a side-by-side. Money does not bring you happiness, but you're really miserable without it. And when you do not have it, you tend to get nickel and dimed even more than you normally would if you had something in the bank account. So how Laura and I approach replacing a pickup side-by-side is, if our annual repairs and maintenance on it is 3 to 4 payments, we're going to replace it, because at that point we are starting to, it's a quarter of what a new one would be.
Yep.
That's how we look at that. So with some of our profits, we have slowly started to replace pickups and side-by-sides, but not all of them. So,
yeah. That's interesting. That's your deduction on that, Paul, because I can echo the exact same thing you said. Okay, so I'm going to buy a cheap pickup and put a bale bed on it. And then I found out that I was spending $10,000 in repair costs every year. Was it really worth buying the $7,500 pickup when I should have just bought the $20,000 pickup in the first place? Zach, you're nodding your head. What have you found?
I've got one of those bale bed pickups that I spend more on it to keep it going than if I'd have just put a bale bed on one of my newer trucks. And so I definitely agree. I know I've said, don't go out there and waste your money on new mechanical stuff, but it depends on what your operation really needs. And when I say don't go buy new mechanical stuff, like I'm not in the hay baling business anymore. I learned my lesson on that. And I got rid of every piece of hay equipment I owned. And so that's what I'm talking about. Now, if you need a newer tractor or upgrade a tractor while these times are good, definitely do it. If your operation truly needs it. And I think that's where you got to know your operation. Like Paul said, if you're spending a quarter of it a year to maintain something that you can buy with a warranty or something you're not going to spend that money on, go ahead. But I'm just saying, don't go buy a bunch of new crap you don't need. That's not going to make you money or not help your business.
Mm-hmm. Dallas, you haven't weighed in on this conversation, so I want to give you some time to answer.
Yeah, sure. I get a little uncomfortable when people start, saying, buying hay machinery is dumb or things like that, because I think if you've got a hay business that's kicking butt, maybe you need to go buy the brand new thing right off the showroom floor and just scale that business and go like crazy, right? So I always get uncomfortable when people start putting out things like, oh, everybody shouldn't do this or everybody shouldn't do that, because it really matters. I like to let the numbers talk. First of all, if you're in a very strong financial position, then do whatever the heck you want, right? It's your money. Go with it, right? If you're trying to build a business that supports your life and that attracts the next generation, and you're sitting here telling me, well, my business isn't profitable, and I look at it and you've got an obvious machinery habit that's unhealthy, we need to fix that. Right. Mm-hmm. And we see that a lot of the time, and I'll pick on Zach down there in East Texas. You go down to East Texas, I bet all of his neighbors have 30 cows and 2 tractors and a baler and 4 pickups, and right. And they're sitting there thinking these cows pay for that stuff. There's no way those cows pay for that stuff. Right. Absolutely. You got to have the scale of the business that works. So another really important thing on this, when I look at equipment, is one of the reasons to have good equipment is to attract and retain talented employees, right? If you give a talented employee a bunch of crappy tools to do their job with, they're going to find somewhere else to go work, right? Yeah. So I think that's part of the equation as well, is that when you're looking at what equipment do I need to upgrade, what do I need to have, it's not just about, what would I want to work with? It's about, well, I want these talented people working with me, so I want to keep them in good tools mm-hmm. so that they can do their job well. So I think that's part of the story of it.
Dallas, you said I like to see the numbers talk, and that's a good phrase there. And I know Paul and Zach, I know you guys do that in your own operations that you're doing there. And what other investments maybe have you guys made that we haven't really talked about, and it could be very particular to your operation and extremely unique to your operation, but has there been some other investments that you've made in the last few years and maybe planning to make that we haven't even talked about yet? Zach?
Yeah. So I dabble in kind of performance horses, which, that's kind of a hobby thing, but we still look at the numbers and make sound decisions, and it's fun. It's exciting. I like that. Trade a little equipment too, and bulls. I've gotten into a lot of bull leasing, which has done really well for supplemental income. When you've got 40 bulls and you're only kicking out 30 or 35 of them at a time, and you got 10 or 15 standing around, if they can get an extra $1,400 for 3 months out of them, I mean, that's a pretty nice little shot in the arm versus that bull just standing there. So the bull leasing has been really well for me. And honestly, buying and selling bulls have been been real good for my business as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Paul, I'm going to ask you the same question. Is there something you put some money into that we haven't really talked about yet?
Yeah, Laura and I, professional development. We've really been hitting it pretty hard. We joined EL. We've joined Josh Treppen's 100X breakthrough program as well. And we've been kind of trying to just get some more hobbies as well. So yeah, just more on a personal level. That's where the investment's gone. Yeah. Dallas, I'm going to ask you, you're going to speak on two behalfs, yours personally from your grazing operation, but then also the window that you see in other operations. So go ahead.
Yeah. And I'm going to broaden it from my grazing operation to just other investments that we do. We did a commercial property in Wheatland when RMC needed to expand and needed a larger headquarters. We were looking for places, and we ended up buying a building much larger than what we needed to house RMC. We've got government offices that in here that lease from us and things like that, and that's been really. It's been really nice. There's downsides to it, obviously. Probably the biggest thing is I have a really great guy who's a retired guy and he runs it. So he gets all the due tenants in there. He does all the light bulbs and toilet clogs and all that kind of stuff, right? And so that's been a good thing for us to do. And again, just kind of looking at that branching out piece. That was a good thing from us. From the other businesses we look at, I think Zach and Paul represent those well, right? Just people who look at what fits them. The thing I would suggest is what I see too many agricultural people do is when they diversify into another business, they think they also need to be the one running that, right? And so maybe you got, a business that's doing a couple $1 million in cattle and all this kind of stuff. And now we go over here and we create this little distraction for them, and they want to go spend all their time doing that distracting thing, right? So I just really want to caution people that just because you own something doesn't mean you need to run it. Get a business, get good people in place, and let that thing, you can make the big strategic decisions. You can do a lot of the deal making, but resist the temptation to have yourself be the one out there weeding the garden on whatever you just bought.
Yeah. Okay, let's take another break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about one thing that none of you have mentioned about where you would maybe pay or use that $50,000. And I want to know why you didn't mention this. So we're going to talk about it when we come back. Your pasture is under attack. Yeah, horn flies. They're wreaking havoc on your herd, dealing damage to your cattle's weight, and in turn, that does affect your bottom line. That's why you need a solution in your arsenal that can withstand an attack. Multocida IGR is the first and proven feed-through that is battle-tested as an effective hornfly management product, delivering the defense needed to keep your herd productive and your profit strong. Win the battle for your cattle. Learn more at multocidaigr.com.
Imagine keeping your cattle exactly where you want them, while being able to tap into insights powered by a collar and an app. No Fence is the world's first virtual fencing system for grazing livestock. From the palm of your hand and delivered with GPS technology, you can set and move pasture boundaries, gain insight into grazing patterns, receive reduced animal activity alerts, and more. No wires, no posts, just empowered grazing that supports healthier land and your herd goals. 10,000 plus producers globally already trust No Fence. Explore the possibilities at nofence.com.
All right. Well, when I left into the last segment, I said something that we're going to talk about that none of you had really mentioned about spending money on, but I do have to retract because at break, Dallas informed me that actually, Paul, you had sort of mentioned this. And that is this. We've got a little extra money. We're a little flush in our operations. Why aren't we paying down debt? Paul, you mentioned it briefly, so I'm going to give you the first option at this, and then Dallas and Zach, I want to hear your guys' take on paying down debt. Paul, go ahead.
Well, in the context that it was right at the beginning, and it was an enormous amount of debt. And so the only way to actually start building net worth was to pay it down. By paying it down and doing it quickly, it freed us up. We own all the cows now. We got 2 more years on the equipment, but we now have the equity in those cows to now move into the other the yearling enterprise, the heifer development, things like that. Mm-hmm. So it was a set of handcuffs that needed to get taken off, really. And we just built to it and got it done. Looking back now on it, we maybe didn't have to do it nearly as fast as we did, but I don't feel like we sacrificed too much either to do it. Mm-hmm. So rates were far lower than they are now too. So
yeah. When I think about this, it sort of ties back a little bit to our conversation that we had when we started talking about equipment, guys, and making that investment in equipment. And if you're not going to pay outright for that equipment, of course, you're going to have to put that on a bank note. And so, how you structure that, of course, is going to vary for each guy's operation or what they feel is the right way. But I think about that a little bit, where we're flush a little bit in our industry right now. Maybe there's a little bit of equipment that you bought, or maybe some different things. Maybe it's a land investment, whatever that could be. So why aren't we being aggressive in paying down our debt? And Zach, I want to go to you on this.
I'm not anymore. I used to have that mindset, but I don't mind a little debt. I like having quite a bit of cash on hand. So versus paying off all my debt, I like keeping cash liquid for opportunities that come. I know I can service my debt, and that's just the way I operate. And not suggesting that to anybody. I know my capabilities of servicing my debt. I know what it takes. And so instead of paying it all off, I prefer to have the cash on hand and have a pretty good buffer. Just that's my peace of mind. The debt doesn't bother me. It used to. I kind of have a new outlook on it now. I owe very little I've got about 580, 600 head of cows, and I owe very, very little on them. And so it just gives me quite a bit of peace of mind having them paid down so low.
Mm-hmm. Dallas, going to go to you with the same question on that.
Yeah, I think some of the reasons why you're hearing us answer this way is you're talking to 3, and I'd count you in this too, Justin, 4 businesses that are kind of midlife businesses, right? Where we've all kind of gotten ourselves through probably a rough time early on when we all started. And now we've probably got a little comfort in our businesses. And so debt has maybe changed a little bit. I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan, and I think carrying debt that's not helping you. And if you take a bad business, servicing debt is one of the first things you need to focus on, right? Is clean that stuff up, get out from underneath that stuff, especially bad debt, consumer debt, kind of stuff like that. Yeah, let's clean that up and let's get over it. Once you start running a good business and building some momentum, I think of it as a flywheel, getting that flywheel spinning. Carrying some debt actually helps you make that flywheel bigger, right? And helps so no debt is kind of I'm learning good financial habits. I'm actually making my business work. But then once we actually start building a healthy business, using debt as a tool to help spin that, right, is part of the smart process of it. So there's a really kind of a caution there about where people are at and those kind of things. And then I never try to tell somebody what I think their value should be, right? And we have a lot of people come to us that hold the values of, I don't want to have any debt. Right. And as a value statement, that might be a great thing to have. As a business thing, that's kind of putting yourself in a corner a little bit. But yeah, anyway, that's my thoughts on it.
And what I think about, guys, and I know you're this as well. I look at where the interest rates are at now versus, I think, Zach, you'd mentioned a little bit ago that interest rates were way different several years ago. I've got some debt, and some of it's kind of a long-term debt, and I'm not opposed to paying it off, but it's like 3%. And I'm like, why would I, Zach, to your phrase of you like to have a little cash on hand versus, because if I have to replace that cash, I'm going to be at 6.5, whatever, the current rate is now for a short-term operating note. So to me, I don't see, that's where I get at too. Now, if you went and bought a pickup in the last couple of years, well, maybe that would be something to possibly look at paying off, just so that when the prices do come down off these calves, you're not stuck out there trying to pay on a piece of equipment that you can't now service. Anybody's thoughts on that, Paul?
Yeah, it's actually something I was thinking about in preparation for this podcast is what is a short-term liability? Is it 1 year? Is it 1 to 3 years? It's more intermediate, but we're always we 100% agree with Dallas. We're never going to be solely on a cash basis. We're always going to have a line of credit, things like that. So that's how we have springboarded our business, is using debt as a tool. So, but cleaning up some of those short-term liabilities kind of cleans off that balance sheet, I think is pretty big. Do what you can when you can. So that way they don't creep up and catch you. So,
Yeah. And I like what Paul said. Like, I'm a first generation pretty much, so I don't have this huge land base. I don't have this huge cash pile to back me up. So I need debt to grow, to get to where I'm going to go. If I did it without debt, I might be 60 years old before I got to where my, that's one reason why I'm not averse to debt, is because to get to my goal and to grow my business, I've got to have it. So that's why I'm not afraid of debt anymore.
All right, guys, let's take a quick break. There's been some really good dialogue back and forth and some things brought out that I hope we're covering all the bases. And if not, we'll try to get them covered in the next segment and kind of wrap up our entire conversation, all right? Managing your land takes the right tools to get the job done. And at Central UAS Technologies, they're helping ranchers explore what's possible with advanced drone solutions that are built for precision, efficiency, and real-world challenges, from targeted applications to hard-to-reach terrain. Their technology helps you reduce waste, improve coverage, and make smarter decisions across your operation. They're backed by over a decade of innovation. This isn't just a drone, folks. It's a complete aerial solution. Central UAS Technologies. Versatility that saves. Learn more at centraluastechnologies.com.
Horn flies stressing your cattle? Make fly control one and done with Alticid IGR XRB. Alticid IGR XRB delivers season-long hornfly control from a single application bolus, providing up to 195 days of relief regardless of mineral consumption or location. It breaks the hornfly life cycle with no impact on beneficial insects, giving you flexible, consistent control. Learn more at cargillanimalnutrition.com/Alticid bolus.
All right, guys, Dallas, you at the break had mentioned that you had come up with kind of a list of criteria of ways that you maybe go through this checklist of things about how you would deploy the extra capital that you might be seeing in your operation. Work us through that list of criteria.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I was thinking in my mind, if I'm sitting on an EL meeting and somebody says, all right, we got $50,000 that we're going to deploy in the business, help us figure out where to put it. What kind of questions would I ask to that business? And I think what I'd do is I would pull out a decision grid, which is one of our tools that we use in Executive Link. And the first thing when we do a decision grid is we ask that person to identify what criteria are important to me with this decision, right? So as I started thinking about that for my business, and I made a list of some criteria. So if the listener would want to do this for themselves, just pull out a sheet of paper, go up to a whiteboard, and just say criteria and underline it, and maybe even get the other people in your business to add some things too. So the things I had on my list are improve profitability, right? I'm pretty motivated by that. I like things that make the business more profitable. Resilience in a down market. We've been talking about this, right? So I would want to deploy that profit that makes my business more resilient when the market comes down. Simplicity of operation. I mentioned that's important to me. Owner enjoyment. So this would be something that maybe I don't need, but boy, it would sure be nice to have, right? This is the tracked skid steer, right? Develop business capacity for succession. So is this something that makes my business easier for the next generation to take over or sets them up well? Diversify holdings. Okay. I'm often pretty hard on diversity when I talk in groups. Diversity, focus is a great way to build an awesome business. Lack of diversity is a great way to lose it. And I stole that from Morgan Housel. Yeah. It was a book I was listening to, right? I think it's a great thing. So as we have more mature businesses, we need to think about diversifying our holdings. Cash flow in 1 year is what I put. And maybe the 1 year is not the right spot for that. But profitability is different from cash flow. Right, I could deploy that money in something that's highly profitable, but it might not produce cash for a long time, right? So I like things that cash flow well. And then the last thing I put, and we talked about this with machines, is how could I deploy this capital to attract and retain talent in my business, right? How do I deploy this capital that gets good people want to come be a part of what I'm doing? So that was my criteria list. But Paul, Zach, Justin, do you guys have things you would add to that list for you?
Yeah. I once again kind of that really hit big on that enjoyment, where what are your goals? Where do you want to see this business in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years when you're sitting back? Do you want to be debt free on a cash basis only? Do you want to expand? How many more enterprises do you want to add to it? So I think just really sitting down and deciding what you want, because once again, this is kind of a lottery type situation for people, and it's may not come around again for a while. So,
yeah. Zach, any thoughts?
Really like what Dallas touched on at the end about maybe having to upgrade something for your employees. And he's right. I mean, you take care of your employees and you put them in a nice ranch truck or a nice crew truck or a nice tractor. I mean, that guy's he's going to stay with you. He's going to take care of it. You put people in junk that you would work in, and they're not going to take care of your stuff. So I think maybe, if you have a really good employee and you can use some of your capital to maybe upgrade something that they use every day, they're going to be more invested in your business, and they're going to work harder for you and be more dedicated to you if you take care of them. And I've seen that, putting guys in good trucks, and man, they love what they do. They love working. And, if you put them in the junky old feed truck that has to be in the shop every 2 weeks, they're a lot less likely to want to come back. Mm-hmm. So I think definitely investing in your people is huge too.
Yeah. I take those criteria, Dallas, that you gave, and I think people, rewind, go back. If you're listening on podcasts, you can go back and write those down. I think that was a pretty good list of things that you come up with. And I think about, how does technology fit into this? Paul, you talked about that. That's an investment that we really need to be looking at. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Technology, it's a gift from God, like everything, and utilize it. Utilize it for the greater good of yourself and the people around you. We're starting to dabble with AI right now, and what was sometimes hours of sharpening a pencil and running a calculator for a cash flow is done in 5 minutes when you set the parameters. Grazing plans now I used to joke that we try to do a 3-year grazing plan, and the first year was a cup of coffee. The second year, probably double the time, but the third year was days and weeks of thinking about that third year of trying to be in a different spot at the same time. Well, no, that grazing plan is done in about 10 minutes for the 3 years.
Yeah.
Ranch check, big, huge thing if you have pipelines. For a $750 investment and $20 a month, it gives you the capability to know what your water is doing 24/7. Mm-hmm. You could even maybe possibly talk about collars, virtual fencing, things like that.
Yeah.
Use technology to your advantage. That's why it's there. Don't be scared of it.
Zach, your thoughts?
Oh, I'm 100% with Paul. I spend so much time using AI between the fence business and cow business, and running projections and running other investment opportunities, doing pro formas and everything. Like, it's insane what you can do within just minutes. It would take you hours. And the collars too, I'm pretty excited about that, because that's my kind of way to go against not being able to find more lease ground down here and not wanting to put infrastructure on 13 different lease pastures is, I signed up for that. So I'm excited on my delivery of my collars. I'm not the kind of guy that can go move high tensile. I wish I could. I cannot do it. I can do a lot of things. That is not one of them. Designing a plan on a piece of property in the water and everything, I can't do it. I would love to be able to, but if I can sit here and draw my map and map out my grazing for the next couple of days, man, I love it. And if I can increase my stocking density and improve the health of the land all in one with technology, why would I not do it? So like Paul said, don't be afraid of technology and what's out there. And there's that's just scratching the surface of what all's out there for producers nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Dallas, you.
I agree with these guys. It's awesome to think about what ranching is going to look like 10 years from now, right? It's going to look very different from what it does now in a lot of ways. It'll be some things that hold true, obviously, but the way that the next generation is going to ranch and run these ranches is going to be very different from the way our parents ran these ranches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, guys. I still have 2 questions for each of you, but I think you can answer them fairly quickly. Just real quick, the first question would be, and we'll kind of go in the same order, just a real final quick, maybe short sentence, paragraph type thing as final thoughts about this $50,000 deployment. Zach, you can get to go first on this one.
Oh, I think it's awesome because it's not a huge amount of money, but it's enough to move the needle if you use it correctly. And I think it's a great conversation piece, and I love seeing the different views. Like I would have never have thought water infrastructure, like Dallas said, or putting it back into place, like Paul said. So my mind is turning it and making more money in the quick turns, and so I love seeing the different perspectives on it.
Dallas,
at $50,000, we're sitting here acting like this is new money. Every one of us has $50,000 laying around somewhere in our business that's idle. So maybe even if you're sitting in the perspective listening to this, well, why don't I have $50,000 to blow? Yeah, I bet you do. It's just sitting in something that you haven't sold yet, right? So if you would turn around and sell that thing, now you have $50,000 and redeploy that money into your business. And so that's going to make your business and your life and all your relationships better.
Yeah. Paul.
Yeah, more kind of along the lines of what Zach said. It's not a game changer, but if used correctly, it is going to just propel you in the direction you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Okay, final question. I just, you don't really have to give an explanation of why or anything like that, but a book or podcast or something that you are listening to or are reading that is helping you, from a self-improvement. You all talked about professional improvement's a big deal, right? All right. So what are you listening? What are you reading from a professional improvement? And Zach, go first.
Right now, reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and pretty much I'm a big Haskell fan. I like Ranchonomics. I love anything he has out. So that's my podcast stuff and book right now currently.
All right, Dallas.
I mentioned Morgan Housel, Psychology of Money, and Always Not the Same, something like that. He's got a second one out there. Morgan Housel, really enjoying his stuff.
Okay, very good. And Paul?
Yeah, podcasts were mentioned, and we just 2.5 months ago, we hired our first full-time employee for the ranch, and so I've been reading the book Lead for God's Sakes.
All right. All three of you. Very good. Appreciate it. Very good discussion. Glad that you guys could do it. I know we did this right in the middle of the afternoon, although it is hot out, so it was nice to come inside and be out of the heat. Thank you all for doing this. I hope the dialogue was good for everybody listening, and I appreciate your guys' perspective.
Thanks, you guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Reputations are built when no one's watching, but I'll tell you, they're going to show up on sale day. Prime Vac preconditioning programs from Merck Animal Health help you build more value into every calf with proven products and protocols. The numbers don't lie. Properly vaccinated and weaned calves and programs like a Prime Vac 45 brought $51 more per head in 2025 Superior Livestock Auction data. From calving to preconditioning, prime your reputation and your calf's future. Ask your vet or visit primevac.com. And joining us now here on the Working Ranch Radio Show is Chris Thompson, who is the Technical Services Veterinarian for Merck Animal Health. And Chris, good to have you here today, back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Well, Chris, I know for one of the things that we deal with, when we try to get these calves prepared for everything that's going ahead, of course, the first thing we want is make sure these calves, when they get started, a good start starts always with colostrum. But we also know that there's times that may not always be there, definitely in the amount that they would need. But at the same time, we need to wait several weeks before we can start helping them along with some potential vaccine help at branding time and things like that. So the earlier we could get on that, and the options that are available to do that from an earlier age in these calves could be critical to the success of them down the road, isn't it?
Absolutely. Colostrum is the number one thing that determines a calf's health, both pre and post weaning. So basically its lifetime health is determined by colostrum. Both quantity and quality are very important, but we know from looking at the literature that somewhere between about 10 and 30% of calves do not get the needed amount of colostrum to keep them healthy long term. And this is where I think our intranasal vaccines really come in. We've got some really good options that we've shown we can overcome that maternal antibody and still get a good response to the vaccine. So we can kind of cover those calves that don't get good colostrum. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we never know which calves those are.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things, I know something on our own place that we felt like when we have death loss later on at weaning time, we're wondering if that doesn't go all the way back to when earlier on for these calves. And I think that's one of the things that you're finding as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know heifers don't have near the colostrum quality or quantity that older cows do, but also anytime there's any other stress involved, if we have to pull a calf, even out of an older cow, we know those calves never do as well. And I think it all ties back to a lack of colostrum from when they were born. And, timing of that colostrum is critical because, by 24 hours of age, they're not absorbing very much of that colostrum at all. So getting that colostrum in them, in the first 2 to 4 hours, I think is really, really critical. Mm-hmm. And we know that once we get 12 to 24 hours out from birth, the quality of that colostrum, the protein in there is cut in almost half by 24 hours. So the earlier we can get a good dose of colostrum in those calves, the better off they're going to be.
Yeah. Chris, we jumped right into the fact of this conversation about colostrum as we know the importance of that. But let's back up and let's identify what we hope the colostrum value that brings to the calf. And even now, as you had mentioned, some of the intranasal technology that we're seeing in our industry, specifically outline, this is what we're guarding against.
Yeah. So we've got a vaccine called Nasalgen 3, also Nasalgen 3 PMH, that we know that we can go in at a week of age and we can bypass that maternal antibody by using that intranasal route and get a good immune response and get fairly long-lasting protection for those calves. To me, these intranasal vaccines, if there's a question on colostrum, I think it's a good idea to use it, but we're also seeing them become very, very popular in these branding age calves.
Mm-hmm. Well, then the fact that you talked about it can be used as early as 1 week old, that's pretty significant there, because a lot of times for us when we start looking at branding vaccinations, technically those are a 3 to 4 week when you really see the good use of those being really working for these animals. So the ability to do these in a younger animal is pretty key.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, the earlier that we can show that the vaccine works, the better off we're going to be. We know that injectable vaccines probably don't work as well in these real young calves because some of that immune response gets blocked by the maternal antibody that is there from colostrum. And you know how brandings go. We've always got these tail ender calves that may only be 2 weeks old when the rest of them are 60 to 75 days old. And if we can use intranasal, we know we're going to get good protection in all of those calves.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because even in our operation, that's been something we've been really cognizant about this year, is making sure that for us, we want these calves to be, if they're going to get vaccinated, we want it to really be working. It's a cost that we have to endure. So if we're going to endure that, we want to make sure it's going to work, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you're spending a lot of money on that vaccine. And the biggest thing is we want healthy calves. Mm-hmm. And personally, my own opinion is I think intranasal vaccines in these young calves gives us the best opportunity to get a good immune response in the face of maternal antibody.
Yeah. I want you to talk a little bit about a study that you guys working on that, a lot of studies have tested calves that had not had any sort of colostrum aspect to it. You guys have a study that does a little bit different turn on that. I want you to explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so when vaccines are approved by the USDA, all the studies have to be done in colostrum-deprived calves, which is hopefully not a real-world scenario. So what we did with Nasalgen 3 several years ago is we gave the vaccine at 7 days of age to a group of calves that did have high levels of maternal antibody. They got fed colostrum. We waited about 80 days later, and then we challenged them 2 days in a row with BRSV. And then we monitored those calves for another 8 days. And what we found is we were able to reduce the lung lesions by almost 50% in our vaccinated calves. Another interesting thing is during that post-challenge phase, so that 8 days that we monitored those calves, the control calves that didn't receive a vaccine lost about 3/4 of a pound of weight per day, whereas our vaccinates were gaining just a little over a pound a day. So a 13-pound difference during that post-challenge phase. So we know that vaccine offered good protection from clinical disease. And the really cool part to me, the nerdy science part is that we pulled blood on those calves 8 days post-challenge. We actually saw our titers to BRSV spiking up. So by seeing that, we know we created immune memory in 7-day-old calves in the face of maternal antibody that 80 days later after they got challenged, their immune system had kicked in and started producing antibodies because they remembered that vaccine from 7 days of age. So to me, that was very, very powerful in showing what an intranasal vaccine can do in the face of a lot of colostral antibody.
Yeah. A couple things I want you to hit on specifically with Nasalgen here, and that is this. Touch a little bit on the length of, as it's addressing, you talked about IBR, BRSV, parainfluenza, those kinds of things, and how long that protection is with a product, because I think that's the other thing for a lot of us is, well, how long is this good for?
Yep. So the IBR duration of immunity on that's about 6.5 months. We're at 11 weeks on our BRSV. The PI3 is about 3 months. But the really cool thing, the 2 bacterial fractions of Nasalgen 3-PMH, which are Mannheimia, haemolytica, and Pasteurella multocida, we've got 4-month duration of immunity on those. So to me, this vaccine really fits a branding scenario where we're going to come back and precondition these calves, hopefully about a month before we're going to wean them. I think this vaccine does a good job of bridging that gap of protection that we need during that time frame.
One of the things that is also unique with this is just knowing, I know one of the things at branding time when we're given shots, we usually have a job for the kids, and that's running around with a paint marker and say, okay, this calf's been vaccinated. We put a swipe on them. This has a blue dye to it too as well, so you kind of know what's been vaccinated.
Yeah, so when you mix up the vaccine, the diluent is actually blue in color, and there's a little bit of glycerin in there, which makes it just a little bit sticky. So when you vaccinate those calves, you see that blue dye in those nostrils for quite a while, which is a nice marker, especially in a chaotic branding pen situation. You can just look at that calf's face, and if there's blue dye coming out of the nose, then that calf was already worked.
Yeah. Well, Chris, before we head out here, if folks are wanting to find out more information or to talk with somebody more about it or to get it picked up, get it ordered for this year, and this could be something not only at branding time, can this be used at preconditioning time or weaning and things like that?
Yeah, people are finding a spot to use it in multiple different ways. I mean, there's guys that'll use it at preconditioning. There's other guys that'll use it at weaning. Some of our guys that are worried about colostrum and stuff, they're getting in there at a week of age and giving this vaccine at that time point. So it's got a lot of flexibility. It is safe in pregnant cows and calves, nursing pregnant cows. So the safety profile of this vaccine is incredible. It's an IBR. I mean, you know as well as I do, IBR typically can cause abortion in cows. But the way this vaccine is developed, it is safe even to give in a pregnant cow. So the safety profile is great. People are looking for more information. They can get a hold of their local Merck rep or go online to mercanimalhealth.com. Vaccines available in all the different distribution channels and veterinarians all over the country. So,
all right. Well, Chris, good to visit with you. Some interesting information that you shared. The research, the study that came out of that, I think is very helpful for us. And I like the fact of the ability to get these in these late calves that we might be having at branding. And then, of course, any calf it'd work for. But
yep, I totally agree. Those tail enders, they slip in there. But a lot of times, come the end of the year, we kind of wonder what their health is like if we're not using something like an intranasal on those at branding.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, for sure. All right. Well, good to visit with you. And thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you.
You bet. And again, that was Chris Thompson with Merck Animal Health. And if you'd like to find out more information about everything we were talking about here today, you can find not only the product that we were visiting about with Nasalgen 3-PMH, but also some of the other products they have as we are heading into that time of the year. I know for a lot of folks, you've maybe already branded. Others, like myself, we're just kind of getting started down the branding road, but we will be preconditioning and weaning later, as I know most of you will be as well. So with that in mind, check out their website for more information at mercanimalhealth.com.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the weatherstationexperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
Today's Long Range Weather brought to you by Long Range Apronomectin Extended Release Dewormer, delivering up to 150 days of parasite protection in just one single dose. Find out more at longrangedewormer.com. Well, joining us now with a look at our long-range weather is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, we had talked about it a week or two ago and even last week, the fact that we are absolutely seeing a transition in our weather. In one of your podcasts last week was starting to see that southern flow of some moisture coming up.
Yeah, no, there's been some very modest help in selected locations in terms of the Central Rockies and the Central High Plains. In particular, parts of Colorado and parts of Wyoming have seen a significant improvement. In fact, latest drought monitor showing some changes in drought status in some areas, going down a level or two. But there's a huge swath of real estate, as you just mentioned, that since November has just been very, very dry, and the spring has not been productive so far in those areas. But the patterns are changing. We're going to see less in the way of these cold intrusions coming out of Canada like we've seen for most of the month, and get into a pattern where the lower latitude air starts to come into the lower 48 states. What do I mean by lower latitude air? Basically, we start to see wind patterns that we get Gulf moisture. We get moisture coming up out of Central America and Mexico, having easier access into the United States. And that higher humidity air this time of year can really be the impetus of more active and more rain-producing showers and thunderstorms, as we are definitely seeing a transition from the cold season to the warmer season. So in the next couple of weeks, I do foresee not only, as we just mentioned, the South, but some parts of the Central High Plains and Southern Rockies that are so dry and drought-ridden to at least get some help. I don't think when you have a drought of this extent, it's going to take a long time to get rid of it, but there should be some more productive patterns in terms of what we're seeing with the weather as we get into the end of May and into early June.
Okay. Now, the other big topic, of course, when we're talking weather is the advancement of El Nino happening. And we kind of got two sides or two sets of folks out there. You got some that are really pushing hard in the news out there. And then there's some saying, well, just kind of hold a bit. What are you seeing?
Yeah, there's definitely two sides in the weather field lining up with this El Nino. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. And the reason is that you have to take a really strong historical perspective. Anytime you get into a La Nina or an El Nino, especially when we're strong, like this one's forecasted to be, is that it's not apples to apples. It's not just about what's going on in the subtropical Pacific. That's the main driver. But there are big differences from this developing El Nino in terms of what water temperature conditions out in the Pacific were like in past events, because to really make an El Nino really that impactful, as some people are suggesting, you have to have other things come together. And me and some other folks included, don't see that quite yet. So this El Nino is going to be a newsmaker. It's going to have impacts, but I just caution people to watch out for the clickbait, because we are also in what's called the spring predictability barrier. And that's the hardest time of year, which we're in now, for these sea surface temperatures to be forecasted 6 months in advance. In fact, a climatologist in California put together the last 10 years of El Nino predictions, and every time the model has over forecasted the intensity. So we shouldn't put so much stock in the models and use a little bit of a historical perspective.
All right. Well, Don, appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
See you then.
You bet. And again, that was meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-range weather. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I asked this question: what is your favorite steak and how do you like it cooked? Well, the overwhelming answer that came in was a ribeye done medium rare. I was kind of surprised the filet wasn't in there, but it was a ribeye. And a congratulations goes out to Chris Selesky out of Grassy Plains, British Columbia, Canada. He was the winner in that random drawing, so I will be sending him a set of Working Ranch Radio Show leather coasters. And thanks to everyone that participated in that. Well, the Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.